product provided by Nintendo. Kirby is one of those long-running franchises, 30 years in fact, that had very little in the way of missteps since being created by Masahiro Sakurai and programmed by blessed be his memory Satoru Iwata. Even so, up to this 30th anniversary, there's one thing that HAL Labs, long after the departure of Sakurai and Iwata, refused to play around with, and that is, well, the 3D platformer. The closest they came was Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards, or the 3DS eShop only titled Kirby's Blowout Blast. But even then, that really doesn't go far enough. Now we have that fully 3D Kirby in the catalog, and guess what? It's great. Okay, that is maybe too little information, but that is why we're here, for our brutally honest review of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, as this title deserves some praise. So be sure to leave a like and share this video and subscribe since we're closing in towards 300,000 subscribers, and with it a big Nintendo Switch OLED plus game giveaway. The setup of this game doesn't go further than skin deep, as such is the case with Kirby games. These games have a subtle message that slowly adds more details over time. A good example of how that has been handled in the past was Kirby Planet Robobot on the 3DS, where you got an opening cutscene and witnessed the threat. As you move on, you get to know why the weird alien race has taken over Kirby's planet. In the same way, Kirby and all his friends get pulled into a vortex that leads them into a forgotten land. The Waddle Dees are getting kidnapped, and most importantly, everything is in ruins. As you progress through the game, you will learn why this world turned out the way it did. And yes, there are a few more cutscenes than we are used to in a Kirby game, but the animation and sounds are crisp, which makes them a treat for the senses. Obviously, you're here to learn more about what the gameplay is really all about. In one word, evolution. The way you move Kirby through 3D environments isn't unlike the 2D games that came before, but there's more fluidity to the proceedings. Kirby is still on the slower end of the spectrum, but makes up for it by the copy abilities and sheer amount of fun that the pink puffball can pull off. The moment-to-moment gameplay is varied, which is why the lower speed is basically not an issue. Sure, some might find it a bit tricky to fully envelop in the way Kirby behaves, especially if you come from a Mario game, but to call it boring is wrong in our eyes. Kirby and the Forgotten Land overall plays extremely well, and what makes the fluidity so impressive is that HAL never embraced a design like this. Kirby controls very naturally with the stick, and everything feels immediate. Various abilities have their own interacies, and those elements were kept in mind for the control. What helps in this regard are the levels themselves. HAL went for the sweet spot when it comes to mixing the open, yet linear design found in Super Mario 3D World, but adding additional routes or secrets in every cranny. While there isn't a reward for touching basically everything in the level, it isn't that far off. There are destructible environment pieces, enemies to gulp up, and tons of unlockables. Not overbearing as in the olden days, but enough to make you see levels multiple times. It is basically the feeling of behind this corner I'm sure to find something. What we're trying to say is that they're more explorable and that everything connects to the theme the level is presenting, a tight integration of level and gameplay. There are two defining features that bridge the gaps in the levels, the copy abilities and the brand new mouthful mode. The copy abilities have always been the main selling point of Kirby games, but they shine better than ever before in the Forgotten Lands. Over the course of the game you will come across known abilities like Bomb and Fire. However, what makes them better is that they are upgradable this time around. To upgrade them, you will need to find blueprints that are often stuck in extremely tricky spots. Believe us, they aren't for the faint of heart. There's also a strong new contender in the power-ups department, Ranger. Kirby basically gets access to a gun. By holding down the B button, Kirby can power up his shot and aim with a reticle. The final version of this is way too good to spoil, so keep on the lookout for that one. Then there is a brand new mouthful mode, the main new gimmick for Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Kirby can take control of various real-life objects by sucking them up and using special abilities that go hand in hand with that. If you played the demo, you've likely played around the car or the vending machine, but there are a few more that add layers to the experience. You can turn yourself into a water balloon or send gusts of wind by becoming a fan. Each form is used quite a few times throughout the adventure, and none feel like filler in the grand scheme of things, since they don't replace the function of an ability and add value to the level's journey. What also adds value are two main objectives, outside of finishing the game of course. The first is collecting every Waddle Dee you can possibly find. Not only are they hidden in secret paths, you can also earn more of them by completing certain objectives in the levels or boss fights. While playing a level for the first time, you won't know every possibility and the game keeps the objectives hidden from you. Therefore, you're unlikely to get everything on your first try, even if you're a careful player. By getting more and more Waddle Dees, more functions will become available in the main hub of the game, Waddle Dee Town. Speaking of, you will be able to participate in mini-games, battle in the Colosseum, or widen your figurine collection in the game in this place. The second thing that adds value are the various challenges spread across the world map. When you complete levels, the world map will populate with smaller challenges that take between 30 seconds to 3 minutes to complete. Some deepen your understanding of abilities, while others are races against the clock and all or nothing endeavors. They're a nice break from the regular gameplay and forces you to adapt a little. By completing them, you'll receive star gems, which are needed to upgrade Kirby's various abilities. And from our own experience, we can say that the challenges are very much worth going out of your way for. Speaking of challenges, let's talk about boss fights. They are the least evolutionary part of the experience, as Kirby has dabbled with 3D bosses before this point. But of course, not to this degree. The bosses are fine and get progressively better as they go along. The first couple, in typical Kirby fashion, don't take too many risks so as to not overwhelm the player, but we would have welcomed something a bit harder. You have to keep in mind, this Kirby game has difficulty options, which could have been a nice separator between the two types of players. And it's a little bit sad that the early bosses, even on the most difficult of the options, is not really that difficult. Luckily, the final push towards the end makes for some of the more intense encounters in the franchise. Now you might ask, what about the post-game? Well, it is hard to get every Waddle Dee possible due to the different objectives that are there. Plus, you will need a lot of coins for all those figurines. Isn't that enough? Obviously not. There's an extra harder bonus section that remixes the previous levels you played through. The new versions offer a new objective that focuses on exploration and taking on way harder foes. For those looking for a harder challenge, there's a lot to undertake to see the real end of the game. As far as the presentation of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, the game looks really nice on the Nintendo Switch. The rich palette of colors, variety of environments and sheer amount of details is very welcome. What the Forgotten Land does better than any other game is giving you a sense of scale and environmental presence. Everything is scaled to make Kirby look small and has to overcome the bigger and bigger odds. It is a nice contrast to how powerful Kirby actually is, particularly in the later portions of the game. In either case, everything is extremely crisp and that is what matters in the end. When it comes to music, you know what we are going to say. Kirby games basically tell half of the story with the music, and the Forgotten Land is no exception. The variety of the tunes play into the different worlds, challenges and level design. Take the Vondaria Remains for example. The location is an abandoned amusement park with parade robots and roller coaster rides. The music is overly cheery and upbeat, making the place feel more alive. On the flip side, we have Winter Horns, a snowy place that feels a bit more down to earth. Both are extremely valid, but take a different approach to give the game shape. That's what is so awesome about this game's soundtrack. Overall though, Kirby and the Forgotten Land is a massive win in our books. The number of gameplay tweaks makes this experience a more welcoming one and gives Kirby its new 3D identity. Obviously, not every Kirby game needs to be 3D to become a big deal, but it is nice to have a different flavor where Star Allies lacked a bit. Maybe the first bosses and the amount of abilities could have been better, but those are little blemishes on a game that knows what it wants to achieve. HAL Labs did a great job adding a freer form of gameplay to the formula, making this one of the best experiences from the team to date. With that in mind, our final score for Kirby and the Forgotten Land is a 90 out of 100. And yes, we know this is the same score we gave to Metroid Dread, but this game with its full catalogue, that is to say a solid main quest, followed by a meaty post-game with added key story elements and bosses, deserves it and is totally worth $60. And it isn't because it is in 3D, but because of its length and overall quality. Since it wasn't the 2D nature that made Star Allies a slight letdown and Kirby up to 2022 a missed opportunity on the Nintendo Switch, but that game's at times mediocre quality. But now that we have the Forgotten Land, all is good, and the future for both 2D and hopefully from now on 3D Kirby as well will be just as sweet as the food found on Planet Popstar and the Kirby cafes of Japan. And that is our brutally honest review of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, a game that we fell in love with and is even up there with the quality of 3D Mario Switch games in some sections. But what do you think of the Pink Puffball's latest and first proper 3D adventure? Is it a title that makes the wait for the next 3D Mario easier, or will you skip on this one? Sound off in the comment section down below. If you haven't already, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell, all to make this review more visible and bring us closer to 300,000 subscribers, and with it our Nintendo Switch OLED Plus game giveaway. You rock, and please enjoy one or both of these two awesome videos.